Welcome to our deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at Alan Watts, The Wisdom of Insecurity. You're interested in exploring anxiety and finding meaning in a world that just seems to be constantly changing, right?
Yeah.
Well, Watts offers a really unique perspective on this and suggests that we often misunderstand the problem and the solution.
Yeah, he really flips the script on how we normally think about things.
Exactly. To kind of kick things off, Watts starts by talking about this idea of an age of anxiety where traditional beliefs have kind of faded and science is the main lens through which we view the world. And he says that a lot of people end up feeling adrift in that kind of world. I think we can both relate to that feeling of insecurity in a world that just seems to lack inherent meaning.
Yeah, it's a common experience for sure. And he captures it so brilliantly. He actually uses this analogy of trying to mail a package of water.
Okay.
You just can't do it right. You can't grasp or fix something as fluid as water.
Yeah, that's just a vivid image. I'm trying to picture that in my head, and it makes me wonder if we're making a similar mistake when we're trying to find security and meaning in our own lives. Like, if we're trying to grasp something that's inherently fluid and always changing.
That's exactly his point.
Hmm.
Yeah, he argues that this desire to grasp and fix, to find some solid ground in a world that's constantly in motion, is the root of a lot of our anxiety.
Huh.
And he even suggests that insecurity isn't unique to, like, our modern age.
Right.
It's just a fundamental part of being human. Like, every generation has had to grapple with this.
So if insecurity is a constant throughout history,
Right.
maybe the issue isn't the world itself, but our perception of it, our resistance to its ever-changing nature.
Exactly. He's challenging us to ask, is it the world that's insecure? Or is it our perception, our yearning for something solid and unchanging in a reality that's anything but?
This is already making me think about how I approach anxiety in my own life.
Yeah.
What if instead of trying to eliminate uncertainty, I try to change my relationship to it?
That's a really insightful question. And it's at the heart of Watt's whole philosophy.
Yeah.
He's suggesting a huge shift from trying to control the uncontrollable to finding a way to just move with the current of life rather than constantly fighting against it.
But if insecurity is always present, what about the pain that comes with it? How do we deal with that?
Well, Watts argues that our awareness of time plays a big role in how much we suffer.
Okay.
Think about it. If you're dreading an upcoming surgery, the anticipation of it, projecting yourself into the future, that can rob you of the joy of the present moment.
Right.
Even if you're not in any physical pain right now.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like we're borrowing trouble from the future.
Yeah.
And it's preventing us from fully experiencing what's happening right now, all the richness of this moment. You mentioned that you're interested in finding meaning and purpose, and I'm wondering if this living for the future that Watts is talking about could actually be hindering that search too.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, Watts suggests that constantly focusing on what's yet to come, on achieving some future goal or finding happiness in some distant future, they can actually blind us to the meaning and the joy that already exists right here, right now.
It's like we're so busy chasing after some future state of fulfillment that we completely miss the opportunity to experience fulfillment in the here and now.
He calls it a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
We're always seeking happiness in what's to come while totally neglecting the potential for joy in what isn't.
So it sounds like Watts is saying that the answers we're looking for might not be out there in the future, but rather right here in the present moment. But if that's the case, how do we actually access this present moment, this potential for joy that we're seemingly missing?
Well, to illustrate our relationship to life,
Yeah.
Watts introduces this concept of the great stream.
Okay.
We often view ourselves as separate entities that are struggling against the current of life.
Yeah.
Instead of recognizing that we're actually a part of that current.
I love that image. It's like we're trying to paddle a kayak upstream and just exhausting ourselves when we could just relax and let the river carry us. I think he uses another analogy here too, right? Comparing our perception of life to like stills from a motion picture.
Right, exactly. We try to fix what's inherently in motion, through language and thoughts.
Yeah.
And that just leads to inner conflict and frustration.
So how do we stop fighting the current? How do we learn to move with this stream of life?
That's where Watts brings in this really intriguing idea of the wisdom of the body.
Okay.
He argues that we've become so reliant on our brains to solve problems in the modern world that we've lost touch with this innate wisdom that our bodies possess.
It's like we've forgotten how to trust our gut instincts, our intuition. I remember he uses a really powerful example of childbirth to illustrate this point.
Yeah.
Contrasting the natural ease with which so-called primitive women give birth with the often very complex and painful experience of childbirth in modern society.
It's a stark contrast. And it really highlights how over-reliance on the brain can lead to this sense of separation from our bodies and from the natural rhythms of life.
So we end up trying to think our way out of problems that might be better addressed by listening to our bodies, to those deeper instincts.
Exactly.
That resonates with me. I know I often get stuck in my head overthinking everything
Yeah.
instead of just trusting my intuition. So how do we reconnect with this wisdom of the body that Watts is talking about? How do we bridge that gap between our minds and our bodies?
Well, Watts emphasizes the importance of awareness, just simply paying attention to our present moment experience without judgment or resistance.
So it's not about like blanking out thought or becoming emotionless?
No, not at all. It's more about observing those thoughts and feelings without getting completely swept away by them.
So it's like becoming the observer of your own mind, watching the stream of thoughts flow by without feeling like you have to jump in for a swim every time.
Yeah, and that allows us to create some space between ourselves and our thoughts, which can really reduce anxiety and help us to experience the world with a lot more clarity and openness.
This is starting to sound a lot like mindfulness.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This practice of awareness helps us to see through this illusion of a separate I that's distinct from our thoughts and feelings and sensations.
By creating that space between the observer and the observed, it's like we're opening ourselves up to a whole new way of experiencing the world.
Exactly.
This is already giving me so much to think about in terms of how I approach anxiety and my own search for meaning. It seems like Watts is suggesting that the key lies in cultivating this awareness of the present moment, of our experience as it unfolds.
That's a great observation, and we'll explore those connections even more in the next part of our deep dive.
This is definitely one of those conversations that makes you want to pause and just sit with the ideas for a little while. I can't wait to delve deeper in part 2.
Picking up where we left off, it's important to remember that Watts isn't saying we should just space out and ignore the world, Awareness isn't about achieving some kind of Zen-like state of emptiness.
So it's not about suppressing thoughts or emotions,
right,
but more about changing how we relate to them.
Exactly. It's about being present with whatever arises, allowing thoughts and feelings to just come and go without judgment or resistance, not getting swept away by them.
You mentioned earlier that we often try to fix what's inherently in motion. It sounds like this practice of awareness might help us to stop clinging to those fixed ideas and instead learn to be more comfortable with the flow of life.
Yeah, it's like becoming the observer of your own mind. Just watching the stream of thoughts go by without feeling the need to jump in for a swim every time.
Yeah.
This allows us to create some space between ourselves and our thoughts, which can really help to reduce the intensity of anxiety and allow us to experience the world with more clarity and openness.
That makes sense. It's not about eliminating thoughts or emotions, but rather changing our relationship to them.
Right.
And that brings us to Watt's idea of the marvelous moment, right?
Yes.
This idea that the present moment is the only true reality.
Exactly. Watts points out that we spend so much time lost in memories of the past or anxieties about the future, that we miss the richness and vibrancy of the only moment that we actually have, which is, now this resonates with your interest in managing anxiety, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. I know I'm definitely guilty of spending way too much time worrying about things that might never even happen or dwelling on past mistakes.
Yeah.
And I can see how that steals joy from the present moment.
It's a common trap for sure, especially in a culture that often emphasizes achievement and always striving for the future. But Watts suggests that true fulfillment doesn't lie in achieving some far-off objective, but rather in fully embracing the present moment in all its messy, unpredictable glory.
He uses that great analogy of the menu, right?
Yes.
Comparing our thoughts about life to a menu.
Exactly.
Which is useful, but not the meal itself.
It's a brilliant way to illustrate the difference between thinking about life and actually experiencing it. We can get so caught up in, planning the perfect meal and reading all the reviews and making reservations that we forget to actually savor the food that's right in front of us.
It's like we're so busy thinking about life that we forget to actually live it. But if we can shift our focus to the present moment, to the experience itself, how does that lead to this transformation of life that Watts talks about?
Well, it starts with recognizing that our usual perception of the world as a collection of separate objects, including ourselves, is actually an illusion.
Wait, are you saying that my sense of self is an illusion that I don't actually exist?
That's exactly what Watts is suggesting. And it's not that we don't have individual experiences and perspectives,
right,
but rather that our sense of being a separate, isolated self is really just a fabrication of the mind, a thought that we cling to.
Wow. Okay, I need a minute to process that. So if the sense of separation is an illusion, then what's the reality?
The reality, according to Watts, is interconnectedness. It's about recognizing the inherent unity of all life, seeing the world not as this collection of separate objects, but as this organic whole, a dynamic web of relationships that we are all participating in.
That makes me think of that saying, we are all connected. It sounds kind of cheesy.
Yeah.
But in the context of what we're discussing, it's starting to feel really profound.
Watts takes it way beyond a feel-good phrase.
Yeah.
And really grounds it in experience. It's not some abstract, mystical idea. Our very existence depends on countless relationships and connections to the air. We breathe the food. We eat the people we interact with. This whole web of life that sustains us.
And realizing that interconnectedness, that we're not these isolated individuals struggling against the world, that changes how we approach life.
Absolutely. It dissolves that feeling of isolation
Right.
and reveals this sense of belonging within the larger web of existence. And this brings us back to your interest in finding meaning. It's not about finding some prepackaged answer out there in the world,
Right.
but rather realizing that meaning arises from our relationships, our participation in this intricate dance of life.
So it's not about achieving some grand purpose or fulfilling some preordained destiny. Meaning comes from being present, from being an active participant in the world around us, from recognizing our interconnectedness with all things.
Watts would absolutely agree with that. Meaning isn't separate from experience, from the present moment, from the interconnected web of relationships that we're a part of.
This is such a different way of looking at things. It makes you realize how much energy we waste on trying to control things that we can't control.
Yeah.
Seeking happiness and meaning in some future moment instead of appreciating the richness of what's right in front of us.
It's a really profound shift in perspective. And Watts doesn't stop there. He goes on to explore the implications of this perspective on things like morality and religion,
Okay.
which I think you'll find really fascinating.
I'm intrigued. What does he say about morality? Does he have his own set of rules or something?
Well, he actually challenges the conventional views of morality,
Hmm.
those based on rules and punishments.
Up.
And this idea that we're inherently selfish beings who are motivated by self-preservation.
Given everything we've been talking about, that makes sense. If our sense of separation is an illusion, then this idea of every man for himself kind of falls apart.
Exactly. Watts proposes this idea of creative morality
Okay.
that's rooted in love and understanding, which stems from recognizing our interconnectedness.
So it's less about following rules and more about acting from a place of compassion and connection.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that our actions naturally flow from this sense of unity and interconnectedness rather than from fear or obligation.
So instead of asking what's in it for me, we start asking, how can I contribute to the well-being of the whole?
That's a great way to put it. It's about moving from a morality based on I to a morality based on we.
From I to we. I love that. But what about religion? How does Watts approach that, given that he started this whole conversation by talking about how science doesn't really support traditional religious beliefs?
He offers a really insightful reinterpretation of religion. He sees religious ideas not as literal beliefs about the supernatural, but as symbols that are pointing to a deeper truth about the nature of reality.
So he's not throwing religion out altogether.
Not at all. He's suggesting that we need to look beyond the literal interpretations of these religious doctrines and see them as metaphors for the experience of interconnectedness and the present moment.
This is making me rethink everything I thought I knew about religion. Does he actually talk about specific religious concepts like God, heaven, and hell?
He does, and his interpretations are fascinating. For example, he talks about God not as a separate being out there somewhere,
Right.
but as a symbol for the mystery and wonder of the present moment, for the undefinable isness of reality itself.
So instead of believing in some supernatural deity, it's more about experiencing the divine within the present moment, within the very fabric of life itself.
Exactly. He's shifting the focus from belief to experience, from the supernatural to the natural, from the future to now.
And what about heaven and hell? Are those also metaphors?
Absolutely, for Watson. Heaven isn't some far-off place that we go to after we die.
Okay.
It's the experience of wholeness and unity that arises when we let go of the illusion of the separate self and fully embrace the present moment. It's that feeling of interconnectedness and belonging that we've been talking about.
So heaven is a state of being, not a physical place.
Exactly, and hell for Watts is the opposite. It's the experience of being trapped in that endless cycle of self-obsession.
Yeah.
The constant pursuit of some illusory future happiness.
Right.
The inability to find peace in the present moment. It's the suffering that arises from resisting the flow of life.
That's a really powerful way to reframe those concepts. It's not about reward or punishment in some afterlife,
Right.
but about how we choose to experience life right now.
Exactly.
About recognizing that we have a choice in each moment to embrace the flow of life or resist it, to cultivate awareness or remain trapped in our thoughts.
And that brings us to the heart of Watts's message, which we'll explore further in the final part of our deep dive. He's not just offering us a set of ideas, but really an invitation to a new way of being in the world.
I'm definitely starting to see the world through a different lens now. I can't wait to see how this all comes together in part 3. Okay, we're back for the final part of our deep dive into Alan Watts' The Wisdom of Insecurity. You came to this deep dive really wanting to understand how to manage your anxiety and find meaning in a world that just seems to constantly be changing.
Yeah, and we have covered a lot of ground, haven't we?
We have from the illusion of the separate self to the wisdom of the body, from the marvelous moment to Watts' really interesting take on religion. It's a lot to process, but I'm starting to see how it all connects back to those initial questions about anxiety and meaning. Would you say that Watts offers a way to kind of address both of those things?
Absolutely. And I think what's so powerful about his approach is that he's not giving us a step-by-step guide to eliminate anxiety or a formula for finding meaning.
Right.
He's proposing this fundamental shift in perspective, a change in how we relate to life itself.
So instead of trying to fix the problem, we're learning to change our relationship to it.
Yeah.
That's kind of a radical idea.
It is radical, and it challenges so many of our deeply ingrained beliefs about how the world works. Watts is suggesting that insecurity and change are just inherent parts of life.
Right.
And that our resistance to them is what actually creates suffering.
Okay, but how do we actually stop resisting?
Yeah.
It's easy to say embrace change, but actually doing it, especially when change can be really scary and painful, is a whole other story.
That's where the practice of awareness comes. And Watts would say it's not about forcing ourselves to embrace change,
Okay.
but about cultivating an awareness of the present moment. Just being present with our experience as it unfolds.
So just being present with whatever arises, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant, without pushing it away or clinging to it, this feels connected to what we were talking about earlier with the wisdom of the body. Is it possible that by kind of tuning into our bodies, we can develop a more intuitive understanding of how to move with the stream of life instead of against it?
That's a great connection. Watts definitely saw the body as this source of wisdom that we often ignore, in our very busy modern world.
Yeah.
He believed that by cultivating an awareness of our bodily sensations, we could tap into a deeper understanding of our needs and how to navigate the challenges that life throws at us.
So instead of just relying on our minds to solve all of our problems, we can learn to trust the wisdom of our bodies, the subtle cues and signals that can guide us toward what feels right and authentic for us. But if we're not supposed to grasp onto the good, how do we find lasting happiness?
It's a really great question, and it's one that Watts addresses directly. He suggests that lasting happiness isn't about chasing those fleeting pleasures or avoiding pain.
Okay.
It's about fully inhabiting the present moment, about finding joy in the process of living itself rather than, in achieving some specific outcome.
This reminds me of what you were saying earlier about the difference between the menu and the meal.
Right.
We can spend our whole lives, planning and prepping for the perfect meal.
Yeah.
But if we never actually sit down to savor the food, we've missed the point entirely.
Exactly.
So maybe the key to happiness is to kind of shift our focus from the destination to the journey, to find joy in the simple act of just being alive.
That's beautifully put. And this connects to the question of meaning as well.
Yeah.
Watts believed that meaning wasn't something that we find out there in the world,
Right.
but something that arises from our engagement with life, from our relationships, from our participation in this interconnected web of existence.
So it's not about achieving some big grand purpose or fulfilling a preordained destiny.
No.
It's about recognizing the inherent value and meaning in simply being alive.
Scatting.
It's about finding purpose in the present moment, in even the smallest details of our lives, rather than searching for it in some distant future. It's about realizing that we're already part of something so much bigger than ourselves, something meaningful and awe-inspiring.
This is such a huge shift in perspective for me, and it's making me think of all those times I put off enjoying life because I was so focused on achieving some future goal or, reaching some imagined destination. It's like I was always waiting for the real living to begin, when in reality, the real living was happening all along.
Yeah, it's so easy to fall into that trap, especially in a society that's constantly telling us we need to be striving for more, achieving more, becoming more.
Yeah.
But Watts invites us to wake up to the extraordinary beauty and wonder of just the ordinary,
Mm.
to find meaning in as seemingly meaningless, to see the divine in the mundane. He said that you're already living the dream even if you haven't realized it yet.
I love that he's basically saying, open your eyes, pay attention, and realize how incredible life already is.
Yeah.
And the amazing thing is that this experience of wonder, this sense of meaning and purpose, is available to us in every single moment.
Right.
It's not something that we have to earn or achieve. It's simply a matter of shifting our perspective, of opening ourselves up to the richness of our present experience.
Mm.
It's about realizing that what you're looking for is already here within you and all around you.
So if we can learn to embrace the present moment, let go of our resistance to change, and release our attachment to this separate sense of self, then we can find both peace in the midst of all the uncertainty and a deep sense of meaning and purpose.
That's the essence of Watt's message.
Yeah.
He's offering us not just a philosophy, but a path, a way of being in the world that leads to this much deeper experience of peace, joy, and interconnectedness.
This deep dive has been a real journey of discovery, and I feel like I've been given a whole new lens through which to view the world.
Yeah.
What would you say is the biggest takeaway for our listener? What's that one thing they should hold on to as they go back out into the world?
If Watts is right, and we are already living the dream, the challenge then isn't about finding meaning, but recognizing the meaning that's already present in every moment, in every breath, in every interaction. The invitation is to wake up to the extraordinary beauty and wonder that's already here, just waiting to be discovered.
That's a beautiful way to wrap things up. Thanks for guiding us through this deep dive. It's been an incredible journey.
It's been my pleasure. It's just the beginning of your exploration into the wisdom of insecurity.